You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, Trump is pushing for the classified documents case to now be delayed until after the 2024 election. The reason is obvious. We've spoken about this at length. He wants to try to win the presidency and then use the levers of the government to try to evade accountability for himself. When will Judge Cannon issue a ruling on this?
So the case is up for status hearing next week, and I have a feeling that's when we will hear from Judge Cannon what she's going to do with this remarkable request by Donald Trump and his defense attorneys, because he not only doesn't want a December trial date, he literally asked Judge Cannon to set no trial date. He said, among other things, there are so many motions to be litigated, and they're so complex and unprecedented that, Judge, we don't think it's wise for you to set a trial date. Let's just spend months and months and months litigating motions. And then he boldly asserts, because I will win all the motions and then the indictment will have to be dismissed against me. I mean, I urge everybody to read this 10-page piece of work. Work is not the word I was going to go with there. Because it really is unlike anything I've seen filed in federal court, in a serious federal court prosecution. And we will see exactly what Judge Cannon is made of when she has to deal with the prosecutor saying we can be ready to go to trial in December, and a timely trial is important for so many reasons. And Donald Trump's lawyers saying, look, we're not looking to go to trial at all. So we don't even want you, Judge, to set a trial date.
Well, you had mentioned that December 11th trial date. When will we get an answer on that requested start date from the DOJ?
So either next week, when the case is up in court on, I believe, July 18th, I think we're going to hear from Judge Cannon whether she will stick with the December trial date or she will set another trial date. It could be January, February, March, or if she goes with Trump's suggestion and sets no trial date at all, which I think will raise some real serious questions about Judge Cannon's impartiality and ability to sit fairly as the judge in this case. But I have a feeling one way or another, we're going to know a lot more come the status hearing on the 18th. The one thing that might happen is she will hear from both parties. She'll listen to all the arguments. She will take it under advisement, which is what judges say when they're not quite ready to rule. And then we might hear in the next couple of days after the July 18th hearing how she decides to resolve this trial date issue.
Okay, I want to dig in for a moment into this prospect of her actually granting Trump's request to delay the start date until after the 2024 election. If that's the case, what are the DOJ's options moving forward?
I think the big question that will raise is whether Judge Cannon should be disqualified from presiding over this trial. The federal law says that a judge must take themselves off the case. They must disqualify themselves if their impartiality can reasonably be questioned. Not that they can't be fair, not that they can't be impartial, but if there are some circumstances that would lead somebody to reasonably question their impartiality.
But who would enforce something like that? Because, the argument could be made that we can already question her impartiality. So who is there to enforce a rule upon an enforcer?
It's a step-by-step process. First of all, the law requires the judge sua sponte, meaning on her own, without even being asked, to remove herself from a case if her impartiality can reasonably be questioned. She hasn't done that. We don't suspect she's going to do that. So procedurally, the next thing that should happen would be for the prosecutors to file a motion to recuse. In other words, to enforce that provision of the federal law. Then the decision maker in the first instance is Judge Cannon. Assuming she rejects the government's request that she remove herself from the case, they could appeal that up to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has already delivered a royal smackdown to Judge Cannon for abusing her discretion previously in favor of Donald Trump. So I think this is a legal issue that has real legs. The problem is the prosecutors are going to need to be the one to take the initiative, file the motion, litigate it before Cannon, and then appeal it if she refuses to remove herself.
But to be clear, the DOJ does still have time to have her removed and replaced?
Yes, there is always time, because if a judge does something that raises a red flag, well, then the motion can be brought, it can be litigated. So it's not as if, a deadline expires and then a judge gets to do all sorts of things proving that she's not acting impartially, and DOJ has run out of time. They can't file a motion. They can always file the motion if circumstances dictate it.
Glenn, you mentioned that it is the law that a judge has to follow, that if there's any even question of them not being impartial, that they have to recuse themselves. If she's breaking the law, is there any way that her position as a judge could be in jeopardy?
Not really. The only way to hold a judge accountable for breaking the law. Now, let me add, it's a law with no teeth.
Right.
There are lots of federal laws on the books that say it is the law that you must do it. But if you don't, there's no remedy. You can't be prosecuted. You can't be fined. You can't be removed from office. But, if she violates that law, requiring her to remove herself from a case, the only real vehicle to hold her accountable is she can be referred to a judicial misconduct committee and see if maybe that misconduct committee conducts an investigation, finds that she violates the law, and sort of recommends some sort of sanction. But really, the only way to get rid of a federal judge is impeachment. And, we don't often impeach federal judges, even when they seem to commit impeachable conduct. It's just not something that members of Congress, who would have to bring the articles of impeachment and then have a trial in the Senate, are really all that enthusiastic about doing.
Okay. I know we've spoken about this, but what would Trump's options to quash these investigations be if he does win the presidency while he's contending with these indictments, which ultimately is his plan from the get-go?
Yeah, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. So if the trial is still pending against him, if he can actually convince Judge Cannon to push this trial out beyond the 2024 presidential election, then what he's going to do is appoint yet another corrupt attorney general and orchestrate a dismissal of his own case. Even if there's a special counsel still in place, and there are some protections that prevent a special counsel from being fired except for good cause, Donald Trump won't abide by any of that. He will direct his corrupt attorney general, maybe he'll bring Bill Barr back for the sequel, to dismiss the case against him. And I'm quite sure that is what would happen. So that's one thing that could result. The other thing is, if the case goes to trial, if Donald Trump is convicted and Donald Trump then wins re-election, he can pardon himself. Now, I don't believe a presidential self-pardon will pass constitutional muster or legal muster. I actually think the federal courts would strike down a presidential self-pardon, but it's not an issue that's ever been litigated in the courts. He would certainly do it. I would bet my buck that he would do it, and then he would let others go ahead and fight it out in court.
Yeah, or worst case scenario, he could also talk about invoking the 25th. His vice president then would be there to pardon him, and he would find ways to basically abuse the constitutional process to evade accountability for himself.
He's done it before. He will do it again.
All right. Well, obviously, with that said, we hope that, with all eyes on Judge Cannon right now, we're hoping beyond hope that she does the right thing here and doesn't allow the Trump team to abuse this process by pushing it until after the 2024 election. So we'll keep a close eye on this. Obviously, within the next few days, we'll have an update. So if you want to stay on top of this stuff, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.